I served my cheating wife divorce papers, then vanished as police took over. Ryan Keller stood in the kitchen of their elegant home, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the crisp autumn air that slipped through the open window. The morning sun flooded the space, illuminating every corner of the room. Yet in that brightness, Ryan felt a shadow growing, the shadow of doubt. He leaned against the granite countertop, watching his wife, Brooke, as she focused on her phone. Married for 8 years, Ryan still found her stunning, her long auburn hair cascading effortlessly over her shoulders, her green eyes sparkling with an unexplainable vivacity. Yet, lately, that sparkle seemed to flicker like a dying bulb. "Phone's getting heavy, huh?" Ryan joked, hoping to draw her attention from the screen. Brooke chuckled lightly, but there was an edge to her laughter, a hint of something evasive. It was one of many signs he had dismissed: the late nights at work, the mysterious texts she'd hurried to hide, and the new clothes that seemed excessive for a couple's life in their small town. Every day felt like a performance, and for the first time, Ryan doubted if he'd get a standing ovation or a scathing review. His unease coiled tighter around his chest when he stumbled upon a group chat in her texts while borrowing her phone. "Love you, baby, see you soon," read one from a contact he didn't recognize. It was as if thunder had struck in the middle of a clear sky. Instinctively, he felt the ground shift beneath him. The gathering storm made no sound. Instead, it silently dismantled the life they had built together, piece by piece, as Ryan prepared himself for an inevitable confrontation that would shatter the remnants of his trust. The morning seemed to stretch on interminably after that discovery. The coffee percolator dripped methodically, a sound that felt syllabic against the weight of the silence between them, each drop echoing the rhythm of his fraying thoughts. Ryan attempted small talk about work, the garden, the weather, but each word felt heavy with insincerity. How could he discuss mundane details with the ghost of doubt wearing Brooke's familiar face? Finally, he turned away from her and let the phone slip from his thoughts, his eyes drawn to the window. Outside, the leaves danced freely in a gentle breeze, vibrant reds and golds twirling in celebration. He considered for a moment how beautiful their life had once seemed, adorned with laughter and shared dreams, yet beneath that brilliance lay unseen fractures. Perhaps the trees outside were veiling their own scars, nature's way of showcasing resilience despite inevitable transitions. "Ryan." Brooke's voice, hesitant and soft, pulled him from his reverie. He looked back, finding her gaze fixed firmly on him, an unspoken question hanging heavy between them. Instinctively, he straightened, wishing to appear composed, as if his insides weren't a chaotic whirlpool. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her brow knitting slightly. "Just tired," he replied, knowing even as he spoke that the facade was wearing thin. What was supposed to be a simple admission felt like an intricate dance on the edge of a cliff, where one misstep could send him tumbling into a chasm of despair. As he met her gaze, searching for some sign of the woman he once knew, a wave of desperation jolted through him. Could he truly believe everything was fine? The phone lay on the table, a reminder of hidden conversations and secrets, drowning out the sincerity that had once defined their love. Brooke resumed her scrolling, eyes glazed over, losing herself in the digital world that predatorily drew her attention away from him. He felt a pang of longing, not just for her undivided focus, but for the connection they used to share, the kind that felt solid and genuine rather than hollowed out by suspicion and doubt. The laughter they'd once shared felt buried beneath layers of obligation, and he wondered how easy it was for them to sit there, this couple of 8 years, strangers amid shared memories. With mounting anxiety tightening its grip, Ryan paced the room, each step echoing with determination. The last few months had slowly peeled away at his composure, late-night excuses, the random trips, the fervent text messages. What else was there, hidden beneath layers of denial? It was as if he were opening a Pandora's box, fearful of the release of chaos that lay within. "Brooke, can we talk?" The words slipped from his mouth as he turned to face her, the weight of uncertainty casting long shadows in the corners of his mind. "About what?" Her expression shifted ever so slightly, a flicker of awareness crossing her features that made his heart race with apprehension. He saw it, the tiniest narrowing of her eyes that said she suspected, perhaps, that he had unearthed the truth she tried to hide. Instead of the slow unraveling he had envisioned, a dam broke within him. "About us. About what's been happening." The room fell silent, and for the first time he saw her almost flinch, her shoulders tightening as if preparing for an impending storm. "Ryan, I think," she began, but he cut her off, the surge of adrenaline pouring strength into his voice. "I don't want to hear excuses, Brooke." Just tell me if it's true. Are you seeing someone else? Is there someone else? The question hung painfully in the air, a heavy anchor pulling at both their hearts in that instant. Her eyes widened, and tears framed them, vivid green pools of conflict. How can you ask me that? She whispered, horror and sorrow intertwining in her voice. After everything we've built together? Because I need to know if I've been living a lie. Because I can't ignore the signs anymore. His voice cracked, anguish spilling out of him like a river breaking free of its banks. He realized then that, despite his best intentions, confronting her felt like a desperate bid for clarity amidst chaos, a threadbare act of trying to stitch the fraying fabric of their marriage back together. I would never do that to you, she exclaimed, but her conviction felt unsettling, teetering on the edge of truth and evasion. A part of him desperately wanted to believe it. He longed for the comfort of their earlier days, the laughter they shared over simple dinners, dreams spoken under starlit skies. But the other part of him, shadowed by doubt and betrayal, urged him to be vigilant, to pry deeper. The kitchen, once a sanctuary filled with warmth and intimacy, transformed into a battleground where innocence was questioned and trust teetered on the brink. Standing there, he felt more alone than ever, locked in a struggle with the love that had been their firm foundation, now crumbling before his eyes. Then let's stop pretending, Ryan said, resolute, feeling as though he were walking a tightrope stretched between pain and resolution. Let's confront this. I can't ignore what's happening, and whatever it is, it needs to be brought out into the light. The words hung between them, heavy with the thread of impending upheaval, an invitation for Brooke to finally show her true colors. He watched her reaction, searching for something. Remorse, relief, perhaps an inkling of honesty. Instead, silence enveloped them like a shroud, and in that moment, Ryan recognized the devastating truth. Their love, once vibrant and consuming, now felt like a ghost haunting its former home, the echoes of promises long forgotten reverberating with the weight of inevitable decisions they would both soon face. The morning seemed to stretch on interminably after that discovery. The coffee percolator dripped methodically, a sound that felt syllabic against the weight of the silence between them, each drop echoing the rhythm of his fraying thoughts. Ryan attempted small talk about work, the garden, the weather, but each word felt heavy with insincerity. How could he discuss mundane details with the ghost of doubt wearing Brooke's familiar face? Finally, he turned away from her and let the phone slip from his thoughts, his eyes drawn to the window. Outside, the leaves danced freely in a gentle breeze, vibrant reds and golds twirling in celebration. He considered for a moment how beautiful their life had once seemed, adorned with laughter and shared dreams, yet beneath that brilliance lay unseen fractures. Perhaps the trees outside were veiling their own scars, nature's way of showcasing resilience despite inevitable transitions. Ryan, Brooke's voice, hesitant and soft, pulled him from his reverie. He looked back, finding her gaze fixed firmly on him, an unspoken question hanging heavy between them. Instinctively, he straightened, wishing to appear composed, as if his insides weren't a chaotic whirlpool. Is everything okay? She asked, her brow knitting slightly. Just tired, he replied, knowing even as he spoke that the facade was wearing thin. What was supposed to be a simple admission felt like an intricate dance on the edge of a cliff, where one misstep could send him tumbling into a chasm of despair. As he met her gaze, searching for some sign of the woman he once knew, a wave of desperation jolted through him. Could he truly believe everything was fine? The phone lay on the table, a reminder of hidden conversations and secrets, drowning out the sincerity that had once defined their love. Brooke resumed her scrolling, eyes glazed over, losing herself in the digital world that predatorily drew her attention away from him. He felt a pang of longing, not just for her undivided focus, but for the connection they used to share, the kind that felt solid and genuine rather than hollowed out by suspicion and doubt. The laughter they'd once shared felt buried beneath layers of obligation, and he wondered how easy it was for them to sit there, this couple of 8 years, strangers amid shared memories. With mounting anxiety tightening its grip, Ryan paced the room, each step echoing with determination. The last few months had slowly peeled away at his composure, late-night excuses, the random trips, the fervent text messages. What else was there, hidden beneath layers of denial? It was as if he were opening a Pandora's box, fearful of the release of chaos that lay within. Brooke, can we talk? The words slipped from his mouth as he turned to face her, the weight of uncertainty casting long shadows in the corners of his mind. About what? Her expression shifted ever so slightly, a flicker of awareness crossing her features that made his heart race with apprehension. He saw it, the tiniest narrowing of her eyes that said she suspected, perhaps, that he had unearthed the truth she tried to hide. Instead of the slow unraveling he had envisioned, a dam broke within him. About us. About what's been happening. The room fell silent, and for the first time he saw her almost flinch, her shoulders tightening as if preparing for an impending storm. Ryan, I think, she began, but he cut her off, the surge of adrenaline pouring strength into his voice. I don't want to hear excuses, Brooke. Just tell me if it's true. Are you seeing someone else? Is there someone else? The question hung painfully in the air, a heavy anchor pulling at both their hearts in that instant. Her eyes widened, and tears framed them, vivid green pools of conflict. How can you ask me that? She whispered, horror and sorrow intertwining in her voice. After everything we've built together? Because I need to know if I've been living a lie. Because I can't ignore the signs anymore. His voice cracked, anguish spilling out of him like a river breaking free of its banks. He realized then that, despite his best intentions, confronting her felt like a desperate bid for clarity amidst chaos, a threadbare act of trying to stitch the fraying fabric of their marriage back together. I would never do that to you, she exclaimed, but her conviction felt unsettling, teetering on the edge of truth and evasion. A part of him desperately wanted to believe it. He longed for the comfort of their earlier days, the laughter they shared over simple dinners, dreams spoken under starlit skies. But the other part of him, shadowed by doubt and betrayal, urged him to be vigilant, to pry deeper. The kitchen, once a sanctuary filled with warmth and intimacy, transformed into a battleground where innocence was questioned and trust teetered on the brink. Standing there, he felt more alone than ever, locked in a struggle with the love that had been their firm foundation, now crumbling before his eyes. Then let's stop pretending, Ryan said, resolute, feeling as though he were walking a tightrope stretched between pain and resolution. Let's confront this. I can't ignore what's happening, and whatever it is, it needs to be brought out into the light. The words hung between them, heavy with the threat of impending upheaval, an invitation for Brooke to finally show her true colors. He watched her reaction, searching for something. Remorse, relief, perhaps an inkling of honesty. Instead, silence enveloped them like a shroud, and in that moment, Ryan recognized the devastating truth. Their love, once vibrant and consuming, now felt like a ghost haunting its former home, the echoes of promises long forgotten reverberating with the weight of inevitable decisions they would both soon face. As he studied her, the tension hung palpably, a noose tightening around their shared reality. Brooke held her breath, her eyes darting from his face to the ground, as if she were seeking refuge in the earth itself. Ryan took a step forward, needing to bridge the chasm growing between them. Brooke, please. If there's something you want to tell me, now is the time. We can't move forward without honesty. Her lips quivered, words choking in her throat, and for an agonizing moment, he found himself suspended in hope and doubt. The silence between them stretched, bitter and laden with the weight of unspoken truths. Could their marriage withstand this revelation? Could they emerge not fractured, but perhaps renewed, if she only showed him her heart? I swear, Ryan, I thought I could manage everything. Keep you and him. Her voice broke, anguish spilling forth. I didn't mean for it to happen. It spiraled out of control. I'm sorry. The confession strangled the air between them, turning his sorrow into a cold knife, twisting deeper into the heart of their shared life. But it did happen, didn't it? You let it happen, he responded, pain cracking through the surface of his resolve. Would you make excuses? Something so weak and pitiful while clinging to phantoms of trust? The hurt echoed in every word, his heart a storm of feelings he had never anticipated, pain intermingled with an odd sense of relief that finally, she had acknowledged his worst fears. But I love you, she cried, anguish flooding her voice, desperation clawing at the edges of their fragile connection. You have to believe that. I just lost my way. Everyone else's expectations, this weight. I felt trapped. The tears streaming down her face illuminated the depths of her conflict, yet they did little to soothe the wounds festering within him. Trapped, he echoed, incredulous, pushed into disbelief by her attempt to justify her betrayal. You made those choices, Brooke. Love doesn't act this way. It wouldn't find sanctuary in someone else's arms just because the going got tough. You let fear blind you when all I wanted was to support you. His shoulders sagged as the room pulsed with their shared pain, a music only the two of them could hear, alive and raw. Behind her tears, he felt the dam of her sorrow nearly burst, each sob an echo of regret filled with the weight of consequence pressing them into the depths of uncertainty. Would there even be a way back for them, or had the seeds of doubt already poisoned their bond irrevocably? Ryan took a deep breath, feeling the heat of anger begin to smolder alongside the ache lodged in his chest. Perhaps this was just the beginning of the confrontation, a prelude to something bigger that could unravel the tangled threads of their lives. The darkness gathered invisibly, pressing heavily against their fragile hearts. The hope he once held for reconciliation began to fade into something darker, something heavy with unresolved feelings. "Tell me," he prompted, his voice barely more than a whisper, "what do we do now? Without trust, can we navigate back?" There they stood, balancing on the precipice of a decision that would reshape the very essence of who they were and what they could become. Two broken souls, enveloped in their own weight, grasping for something solid as the uncertain winds howled around them, carrying with it the uncertainty of whether love could thrive amid such turmoil. Brooke's confessions came tumbling out like a shattered vase, each word striking the air with a crystallized finality. She admitted tremulously that she had been seeing Jake for months, a friend who filled a void Ryan hadn't even noticed had grown. Each admission felt like a dagger plunging deeper into Ryan's heart, severing the last threads of trust they had woven together in their years of marriage. Disbelief pulsed through him like a drum, drowning out all semblance of understanding as he tried to process her betrayal. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she implored, her voice strained, eyes glistening with unshed tears. The look on her face, a mix of shame and desperation, was so unfamiliar. A part of him desperately wished to believe her, to cling to the love that once overflowed between them. Yet the evidence of her betrayal loomed larger than ever, and it clawed at the heart of their history, devouring its vibrant colors in place of a dull gray. "What do you mean you didn't mean to hurt me? You chose this." The words slipped through his clenched teeth like shards of glass, unforgiving and sharp. The anger surged like a wildfire, igniting in the pit of his stomach, fueled by his disbelief. "So you chose to sleep with someone else? Have you lost your mind?" She flinched at his tone. The hurt in her eyes almost made him waver. Yet, that familiar guilt twisted in his chest, fighting against the anger that clamored for dominance. The very foundation of what he believed to be true crumbled beneath him, and here he stood among the debris, grappling with confusion as he tried to pick apart the fragments of their marriage. "I was lonely, Ryan. You were always busy with work." Her voice echoed in the silence, pleading for understanding. It was a feeble excuse, one that felt like oil poured on a fire, igniting an anger he hadn't expected to feel, the sort of rage that pulsated hotly beneath his skin, threatening to burst forth and consume everything in its path. "Lonely? That's your excuse." The incredulity in his voice reverberated loudly within the four walls, mixing with the remnants of laughter they'd shared only months prior. The memories felt like a cruel joke now. "I was busy building a future for us, while you were busy chasing someone else." The thoughts raced through his mind, knotting together like a tangle of strings, suffocating him in the process. Time seemed to stretch taut, an elastic band ready to snap. The air thickened with unspoken words and shrouded truths that neither of them wanted to confront. A tension simmered just below the surface, vibrating with an energy that reverberated against the walls, consuming every particle in the room. "What did we build?" Ryan's voice faltered momentarily, raw with emotion. It was hard to reconcile the flurry of worthlessness that filled him as he began to question everything. The foundation of love they had worked so hard to establish, now splintered underfoot like an old wooden floor, the creaks and cracks echoing through their lives. All those sunsets they had chased now felt tainted by her betrayal. "Please, I didn't want it to happen like this," she begged, tears tumbling down her cheeks, shimmering like starlight on a cold night. "I thought I could manage it all, keep you and him apart. I thought I was strong enough." Suddenly, the weight of betrayal pressed down on him like a heavy fist, forcing him to take a step back. "But you weren't strong enough, were you?" The words were bitter on his tongue, slicing through the fabricated peace they had surrounded themselves in, an illusion that shattered before him. Sparks of anger continued to flare and dance within him, but it was the palpable chill of grief that held him captive now. Ryan clenched his fists, trembling with suppressed sadness. The woman he thought he knew, the wife he had pledged his life to, stood before him, a stranger whose heart seemed lost in the haze of her decisions. "Brooke," he said, each syllable heavy with profound weight. "What do I mean to you now? If desire was so easy to forget, to toss aside, how do you expect me to react?" The question lay between them, a chasm too wide to bridge, filled with jagged stones of distrust and resentment. Brooke's face shifted, her sorrow deepening, and he caught glimpses of regret lacing through the layers of her emotions. But was regret enough? The tether tying them together felt frayed and weak. He couldn't help but wonder if it could withstand this storm. I love you, Ryan. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, she pressed, desperation heavy in her voice. It was a cry for forgiveness, an invocation of everything they had ever shared, yet it hung there, suspended in the atmosphere between them, unable to land solidly. Did love still exist within the confines of this chaos? He wanted to believe, but the truth felt like glass, sharp and shattering. How could you throw away everything? He challenged, voice trembling with the weight of his emotions. You let fear drown out the love we fought to cultivate in the dark, in the rain. Every step, every moment could have been faced together. With his heart expanding with pain, Ryan thought of all their shared laughter, of the dreams they had built in the whispers between the sheets. Memories flooded back, each one more vibrant than the last, but now they were dimmed and twisted, reflecting the stark reality of betrayal. When had that connection dimmed into mere survival instead of collaboration? How had they dwindled into strangers living side by side, clinging to ghosts of what once was? I thought you wouldn't understand, she whispered, her voice cracking. I thought I could fix it. I tried to fix it, but it all spiraled out of control. I didn't want to hurt you. The sobs gripped the air between them, twisting the knife buried deep in his heart. You didn't just hurt me, Brooke. You left me to pick up the pieces alone. He felt the dam inside him beginning to burst, the memories of their collected years threatening to flood his senses, dragging him back into a whirlpool of nostalgia tinged with betrayal. He fought the tidal wave of emotions, but it was useless. Standing there, he realized he had reached a precipice. For every moment they had built together, the gentle touches, the shared laughter, the promises whispered in the dark, now felt like an expensive joke. The question, raw and jagged, tore at his insides. Was it too late for redemption, or could he find the strength to forgive? As if reading his thoughts, Brooke reached out, her hand brushing his arm, a tentative tether still attempting to connect them despite the chasms that marred their relationship. Please don't give up on us. I want to fight for this. I can't lose you, Ryan. For a moment, he hesitated, his heart racing at her words. Could he afford to believe it? Could love still breathe beneath the debris of desolation, suffocated by despair? Did he even want to? His resolve swayed, like autumn leaves caught in a breeze, shifting between hope and bitterness. But the truth loomed before him like a great shadow. It felt painfully clear that they stood at a juncture that could either transform them into something stronger or sever their connection irreparably. Then let's stop pretending, he finally replied, his voice steady by a sudden clarity. Let's confront this together. We need to untangle the mess if there's any chance left. The silence that followed felt heavy, fraught with the weight of their confession, two souls burdened by choices made in the dark. Ryan steadied himself, standing on that precipice. There, amidst the echoes of their broken promises, he felt the fragile thread of hope begin to weave between them, tenuous but alive, and for the first time, he wondered if love could still hold power over the chaos that had threatened to swallow them whole. The sound of rustling paper fell upon the void of their confrontation, thickening the air charged with unresolved emotions. Brooke's face paled, the hurt in her eyes eclipsed only by the shock of my actions. She had never imagined that her choices would lead to this moment. Please, Ryan, don't do this, she pleaded, desperation etching lines on her once familiar features. Each flicker of her gaze felt like a plea clawing for forgiveness that had bridged too far to reach. I already have, Brooke. You have crossed a line, I responded, my voice steady yet trembling with anger. The weight of each word reverberated in the empty room, the memories of our shared laughter echoing like distant specters. Nothing could settle the storm within me. The cacophony of rage and sorrow roiled beneath the surface. I felt a shift in myself, a resolve to reclaim my life from the chasm that opened before us. As I placed the divorce papers on the table, a mix of relief and sorrow coursed through me. The act felt almost liberating, a weight briefly lifted off my shoulders, but came crashing back down instantaneously, replaced by an emptiness that burned cold and hollow. The life I had once cherished was slipping through my fingers like sand, and in that moment, all I could see was how deep the void between us had grown. Leaving the papers behind felt like breaking an anchor. With a tumult of emotion swirling in my chest, I packed a small bag, neatly folding shirts, stuffing essentials without thought. It felt surreal, standing there amidst the chaos of a relationship sprawling before me like some intricate tapestry, once vibrant and alive, now shredded and faded. I wasn't just leaving. I was vanishing, escaping the agony of what we had once built together, taking an intermission from the chaos surrounding our world. Each item of clothing that slid into my duffel felt heavy, as if weighted by the memories of mornings spent together and lazy Sunday afternoons on the couch. I clung to the fleeting innocence of those moments before the truth unraveled. The imagined life I had fought to nurture began to feel like some elusive dream, a ghost whispering echoes of what could have been, haunting me as I prepared to step beyond the remnants of love that had turned into an open wound. Once outside, I felt the crisp night air wash over me, hitting me in waves and bringing clarity. The stars twinkled overhead, stark against the darkness that threatened to swallow my heart whole. I climbed into my car, a familiar seat suddenly alien, and started the engine. The sound felt like a roar, a liberation from the bindings of my reality. But even as I drove out of town, abandoning the life I had meticulously crafted, the landscape blurred and twisted in my rearview mirror, and I felt the ghost of who I used to be nagging at the edges of my mind. The road stretched endlessly ahead, thick forests and ghostly silhouettes of tall pines illuminated by the beams of my headlights. Yet I found no comfort in the deepening night. I was a wanderer now, lost among the forgotten pages of a story I once thought was mine. Hopes for a fresh start tugged at my heart, yet shadows of doubt hovered like specters around me, reminding me of the choice I had made, of the love I had lost. I drove aimlessly through the winding roads, each mile I traversed pushing me further away from the shards of my broken life, yet with each twist and turn, the burden of betrayal nagged at me, a persistent whisper reminding me of all I had left behind. I sought solace in the unknown, hoping time and distance might blur the edges of my pain, and envisioning a clean slate where I could redefine who I was away from the specter of Brooke and her choices. No longer could I ignore the memories of laughter that now rang hollow within me, like a melody turned discordant. I remembered how we used to sit under the starlit sky during camping trips, wrapped in each other's warmth, sharing dreams and trembling whispers. Those echoes shifted now, held captive by the severity of her betrayal, the knife that had carved into our history. The heavy ache in my heart was like a constant reminder, a deep knot of resentment and disbelief that tightened with every passing moment. I watched the landscape change as I drove further into unfamiliar territory, where the vibrant colors of my past bled into the monochrome palette of now, a landscape devoid of what once made it home. It was a world stripped bare, and as I pushed the accelerator harder, chasing the horizon, I prayed for a moment's grace, a chance to say the words caught in my throat. Yet I instead found myself drowning in regret, each inhale a struggle as I grappled with the reality that would follow. The ghost of Brooke lingered at the edges of my thoughts, a figure entwined in mist and memory. Part of me felt the warmth of shared moments resting against the cold realization of her betrayal. I replayed every instance when I had turned my back from the warning signs, those late secretive phone calls, the nights when I had been alone in our bed while she sought the company of another. What did I miss? Was I as blind as she claimed? The internal dialogue spiraled, bringing fresh waves of frustration against the walls I had built to guard my heart. Tears threatened to spill as I vacillated between wanting to scream at her choices and yearning for a connection that felt irrevocably lost. I had loved her fiercely, and it was that very devotion that made her betrayal sting even more sharply. Loneliness had masked itself as a friend, yet I was left grasping at shadows. As the tires hummed against the pavement, I sensed my resolve solidifying. I would not let this heartbreak define me. Somewhere in the clutches of despair, I felt the first flutters of resolve beginning to blossom. No more would I linger in the ruins of our shattered love. I set my gaze forward, moving ever onward into the chaos, fearing it less as the embrace of a stranger that might free me instead of burden me. In the distance, lights flickered against the horizon, reflections of a life where streets could be paved with new choices and opportunities, where I wasn't just the victim of someone else's misdeeds but a protagonist crafting the next chapter of my journey. The thought invigorated me. Perhaps with the dawn, I could awaken to a world unshadowed by betrayal, one that beckoned me forward into the embrace of new beginnings, a chance to reclaim myself from the depths of loss. Yet beneath the bravado, the ember of uncertainty still flickered within me, and as I navigated down the darker roads, I knew a reckoning lay ahead, a confrontation with not just Brooke's betrayal but my own resolve. The horizon danced unteasingly under the night sky, and within its depths, I sought a glimmer of hope where ambiguity nestled against clarity, desperate for redemption not just from her, but for myself as well. As the days turned into weeks, the roadside motel became a familiar prison to me. Its dull walls, dingy and bare, swallowed much of the vibrancy I had once taken for granted. I could hear the faint hum of the world outside, the occasional distant laughter, the thrumming engine of a car passing through, the rustling of leaves dancing in the whispering wind. All of it felt far away, as if suspended in some surreal dimension where I existed in a fragile bubble of anonymity, carefully balanced between the past I was racing from and the uncertain future ahead. The air inside the room hung thick with grief and contemplation, mirroring the mess in my mind. I occupied this liminal space, grappling with fierce disappointment and deep-rooted anger. Yet amidst that chaos, I discovered glimmers of burgeoning hope. I threw myself into introspection, pushing aside the tumult of emotions vying for dominance. Each fleeting moment was filled with the echoes of the life I had left behind, its purity juxtaposed against the reality of betrayal that had left me so painfully exposed. News of my disappearance spread quickly in our small town like wildfire. I learned about it in hushed conversations that reached my ears through the cracks of my isolation. The narrative shifted, and with it came a strange sense of vindication. Many painted Brooke as the villain, the infidelity that had unfolded branding her with an indelible mark as the story unraveled within our community. I could picture her faces, the incredulity, the shame flashed in the eyes of our mutual acquaintances. Sympathy, it seemed, rested squarely on my side of the divide. I welcomed that temporary isolation, seeing it as a sanctuary I never knew I needed. Away from the pressure and expectation that had surrounded my life back home, I began to rediscover pieces of myself that had long been masked by routine and the illusion of my perfect life. When the weekends rolled around, I found solace in somber contemplative walks along nature trails, my heart heavier with every footfall yet lifting ever so slightly as I embraced the freedom those quiet moments brought. Each tree I passed seemed to whisper tales of resilience, of love blossoming seasonally only to fade into the earth, pushed back to nurture growth anew. A part of me toiled to acknowledge my pain while refusing to let it drown me, struggling to understand how betrayal had twisted our bond into a void so vast. Yet time was cruel, and in its merciless march, it brought clarity in the form of vivid memories. I saw reflections of our laughter, those carefree moments spent together, exploring parks hand in hand, believing we were invincible. Every laugh had been a promise, every smile a piece of history now turned bittersweet. Yet here I was, alive, panting, each breath a recognition of survival under the weight of what had been lost. I found myself marked by the ache of unresolved feelings as I painted a narrative of hope against despair. In the dim light of the motel room, I envisioned my future as a blank canvas, untouched yet portable, waiting for me to breathe life into it. Each brushstroke could capture the essence of rebirth, a life lived for me, not her, one not tainted by betrayal but enriched by lessons learned through strife. But my solitude shattered like fragile glass when I heard the unexpected knock on my motel door. The sound echoed in the stillness, jolting me back into the harsh reality I'd previously sought to escape. I hesitated, wondering if it was merely a figment of my frayed mind, a trick of isolation, but then it came again, steadier, more insistent. With cautious trepidation, I opened the door to find a police officer standing before me, her brows furrowed in concern. "Ryan Keller," she asked, her voice firm yet layered with sympathy that set off alarms in my chest. The recognition of my name on her lips was a reminder of my past that I thought I had left behind, a marker dragging me back to the tumult I was desperate to evade. "Yeah, that's me," I managed, words caught in my throat as confusion washed over me. What could this woman want? Guilt filled the air around us, a haze that tangled with the memories I was striving to forget. "Your wife has been trying to reach you. She filed a missing persons report after you disappeared," the officer explained, her tone serious yet softening as she registered the turmoil flitting across my features. Her presence thrust me back into chaos, the way that words can pull the seasons from summer to winter in an instant. The statement hit me like a pile of bricks, the reality that Brooke was searching for me unveiling a fresh layer of conflict. I hadn't anticipated her panic, a flicker of guilt ignited in the pit of my stomach. I squeezed my eyes shut, riddled with a mix of shame and an unexpected desire for resolve. Part of me longed to run, to surrender to the chaos once more and drive away into the abyss, but the other half realized I needed to confront what had emerged from the ashes of love. "This isn't what you think," I said, my voice shaky but steady, not wanting to engage in a confrontation that would serve no purpose. I just needed time away to clear my head. "It's complicated." Her eyes studied me, searching my features for clarity, for sincerity. "I understand, but she's genuinely worried. People in town have been discussing this, her infidelity, the divorce papers. It's become quite the topic, she remarked, her eyes sympathetic but unyielding. Even the way she spoke seemed to echo the judgments already being whispered behind closed doors, conversations that circulated around our community like circulating currents, each eddy stinging with its share of broken promises and shattered hearts. In that moment, the ties connecting me to my past tethered my soul fiercely. Brooke was out there amidst the chaos, stewing in a maelstrom of rumors and accusations. Sorrow welled in my chest as I considered the consequences of her actions. Whatever anger I felt towards her was somehow drowned under waves of sympathy as I imagined her surrounded by familiar faces turned distant. I couldn't allow her to twist in the wind of loss I had created. I knew I had to be the one to reach out, to confront her, not just for my own sake, but for hers too. The weight of my decision settled heavily on my shoulders, my instinct for self-preservation clashing with the compassion I still felt for the woman who had once filled my life with joy. I could picture her anguish in that moment, alone in our house, shadows of memories painting walls that had once been our sanctuary. I need to find her, I said suddenly, determination clamping down on the fleeting remnants of bitterness. The officer nodded, recognizing the turn of my resolve. Such a raw decision evoked a shiver that crept through me. Would I be prepared to face Brooke again? To confront those emotions still swirling dangerously close to the surface? But I realized in that instant that some reckoning was due, not only to her but to myself. The promise of courage to mend what was broken became threaded through my thoughts, urging me to step back into the twilight where remnants of love clung desperately to hope, whether or not I could yet grasp it. As I emerged from the confines of my motel sanctuary, my heart thrummed fiercely in my chest, an anxious prelude to what lay ahead. The world around me whirled like a live draw of amusement, and I felt every heartbeat echo like a drum through the air, reminding me I was on the brink of something monumental. Something demanding the best parts of both Brooke and myself, demanding a confrontation with memories and losses. The police car idled quietly nearby as the officer watched me with an air of understanding, giving me the reassurance that I needed. Before I could step further into the chaos of my decision, I took a deep breath and began to walk toward what remained of our shared life. With every step, I could feel the tendrils of courage unfurling, readying me for the next chapter, a reckoning wrapped in the delicate layers of love and betrayal, pushing me toward the confrontation I could no longer avoid. In those moments, standing before the officer, my heart raced, caught between relief and anxiety. I had thought I could escape it all, redefine myself far from the echoes of my past. But here it was, the reality of a life exposed in the harsh light of day, forcing me to confront the complexities I had fled. The starkness of the police station contrasted sharply with the warmth of the roadside motel, where shadows of my grief had cocooned me in isolation. Now that cocoon had been shattered. The outside world was all too eager to pull me back in, to shine a spotlight on my decision to vanish. "Your wife has filed a missing persons report," the officer explained, her voice steady yet cautious. The gravity of her words pressed down on me like a lead curtain, leaving me breathless. After weeks of hiding, a flood of emotions surged in my chest, swirling into a cocktail of anxiety and guilt. It seemed surreal that the decisions I thought had unraveled my life were now tightening the noose around it. I was still tethered by a thin line of legality and emotional obligation, no matter how far I had run. The thought of Brooke's fear pierced through me, sending shards of regret deep into my very core. Despite everything, the repeated betrayals, the sense of betrayal so profound that it had pushed me to withdrawal, she was still entangled in my emotional fabric, caught in the storm of consequences she alone had faced. That irony was heavy. My escape had led not to freedom, but to the kind of entrapment I had sought to evade. The realization that the agony of our tumultuous relationship had sent her spiraling into panic caused a knot to form in my stomach. "I had to get away," I finally replied, my voice steady yet filled with an undercurrent of turmoil. "You have to understand. I needed to vanish, not from her, but from the pain." The confession felt like opening a dam, releasing emotions long held at bay. It felt both liberating and suffocating. The officer nodded, her expression softening, indicating understanding, not condemnation. "You're not in trouble," she assured me, perhaps sensing the turmoil swirling within my heart. "Just think about your next steps. Many people are involved in this." Her words slowed my racing thoughts, offering clarity and a possibility I had not anticipated. With a mere shift of perspective, the walls began to close in around me, weighing me down with the implications of my absence. I needed to make a choice, one that would reverberate through the storied halls of our fractured relationship. Turning, I saw my reflection in the dull glass of the station's window, the contours of my face stark against the blaring lights of the outside world. I barely recognized myself. The stubble on my chin, the hollow eyes, the expression drawn tight with uncertainty. This was not the man I wanted to be, not the one who promised to love and cherish the woman I had once believed was my soulmate. I closed my eyes and images flooded back, moments colored by laughter, love, and a sense of invincibility. I had been the one to say we could weather any storm, and now I felt lost at sea, floundering in the wake of my decisions. The officer, perhaps sensing my internal battle, continued to speak. "Your wife is in distress, Ryan," she said gently. "And while you have every right to feel what you do, her next steps also matter." Her voice was a tether, binding me to the reality I had hoped to avoid. I could feel the weight of her words sinking into the pit of my stomach, forcing a grappling match between my self-preservation and the compassion still residing in my heart. People in town are already talking about it, the divorce papers, the infidelity. "It's become quite the topic," she remarked, her eyes studying me intently. The acknowledgement of our pain seamlessly blended into the community gossip I had heard through whispers in my isolation. My emotions surged, twining with each reflection, a realization that even in my solitude, I was still connected to our lives, the lives we had built, the world we had inhabited. As she spoke, fragments of guilt washed over me, an uneasy tide that tugged at my heart. I could picture Brooke's face, wreathed in disbelief, vulnerable to the speculations of those around her. The thought that I had thrust her into the eye of this storm, spinning tales and assumptions about her character, ignited a flicker of remorse that I couldn't extinguish. She'd said yes to me without conditions, and yet I had cast a shadow on that commitment. "Is she okay?" I found myself asking, my voice almost a whisper, heart clenched with concern. In that split second, my priorities shifted from my own pain to hers. The anger I had held onto so tightly began to erode like a sandcastle against the surging tide. Perhaps my desire to escape wasn't merely about my suffering. It was about running from the very love that still flickered despite everything that had happened. The officer hesitated, her features softening further at my sudden shift. "She is seeking help," she replied gently. "But her attempts to reach you have made things difficult." There was an understanding present there, a bridge between my actions and consequences, a connective tissue woven through life's unpredictability. I felt compelled to repent, to embrace the weight of my actions rather than recoil from them, shaping them into the identity I had so fervently rejected. "I need to find her," I said suddenly, with a sense of urgency that startled even me. My heart pounded fiercely against my ribcage as determination seeped into my bones. The body that had once been locked in confrontation with itself now pulsed forward, instinctively pushing me toward a reckoning. I could no longer let my pain dictate my next moves. I owed Brooke and myself a confrontation laden with the real emotions that had emerged through our chaos. The officer nodded, realizing that I was ready to step into the narrative I had spent so much time dodging. "That's a positive choice. You have folks who care, who want to help both of you through this." Her words burned in my chest like a lit match. As I stepped out of the police station and into the cooling evening air, I could feel the change in the atmosphere. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced in unison with my own. I was free now, no longer shackled by my internal torment, bridging the gap between what had been and what could be. The ties connecting me to my past pulsed with an urgency, compelling me to reclaim that bond. With every step I took down the sidewalk, the adrenaline surged through me, awakening dormant desires to note on the pain I had drowned too long in my own humiliation. The determination solidified into a palpable force. I mentally mapped out scenarios where I could confront Brooke, where honesty could unfold amidst the wreckage. Would she be willing to listen? Would she want to try to mend the pieces of what we had? Questions raced through my mind as I trudged onward, each footfall a reminder that I was moving towards the possibility of something new. As my footsteps carried me toward our home, the sanctuary that had been tarnished with doubts and accusations, each breath nudged me closer to the eventual confrontation that had been brewing steadily within my heart. Determined to approach her with the bare truth, I readied myself to forge a new narrative, pushing through the garbled memories of betrayal that haunted me. Now, standing on the brink of this new beginning amid the twilight shadows, I embraced an unfamiliar sense of hope, pushing me toward an emotional unfolding filled with uncertainty, fear, and the raw vulnerability that had once defined my love for her. It was into this cacophony that I stepped forward, a blend of resolve and tenderness urging me onward, inward, and finally toward a confrontation worth facing. Ryan spent the following days wrestling with his feelings before making a difficult decision. He had to return to his hometown. The initial rush of freedom he had experienced in detaching from his previous life was now intermingled with responsibility. The reality was complex. He couldn't hide from the impact of Brooke's betrayal nor his own choices in this twisted game of love and deceit. Packing my bags once more felt different this time. My suitcase was filled not with items of escapism, but with the weight of accountability. I had promised myself I wouldn't return as the man who had fled in anger. Instead, I would face the truth, whatever it held for me, even if it meant confronting Brooke one last time. Upon arriving back, I was greeted by the familiar streets of Willow Creek that I had both missed and loathed during my absence. Whispered conversations trailed behind me like a ghost I could not shake, weighing heavy with implications of my choices that echoed through the thin walls of the tight-knit community. Each step felt like a reminder of the life I had once known, yet it felt transformed, tainted by the shadows of betrayal. As I walked through the quaint town square, the leaves crunched underfoot, a symphony of change swirling around me like autumn winds. The cafe where Brooke and I shared countless mornings was still bustling, but now it felt like a stage set for a play where I was an unwilling actor. The aroma of roasted coffee and baked pastries wafted through the air, stirring memories of laughter and warmth, yet my heart felt achingly hollow. It stung deeply to see how much had changed since I vanished, the people bustling about, chatting amicably, juxtaposed against the chaotic turmoil that raged within me. I took a seat at a corner table, my heart drumming a frantic tempo as I anxiously awaited Brooke. The rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall mirrored the countdown in my mind. It was as if time itself was teasing me, teasing the inevitable confrontation that lingered on the horizon. Minutes felt like hours, each second stretching until reality cracked open, revealing the truth I had avoided for too long. When our eyes finally met across the cafe, a rush of emotions surged through me. It was more than just recognition. It was the weight of memories, laughter, and pain, shimmering beneath the surface, throbbing like an open wound. Her eyes, those vibrant green wells of emotion, spoke volumes. They flickered with a range of feelings I could hardly decipher. Deep sorrow, regret, confusion. My chest tightened at the sight of her. She looked fragile, a ghost of the woman I once knew, caught within the tangled threads of her own torment. "Ryan, you came back," she said softly, her voice trembling like a fragile leaf quaking in the wind. The tone struck me, laced with surprise, yet underpinned by something more profound, an ache that might have mirrored my own. It was a strange comfort, realizing I wasn't the only one wrestling with the aftermath of our choices. "I did," I replied, struggling to find my footing in this wreckage we had created. My words sounded distant even to my ears, filled with a hesitance that tugged at my gut like a relentless tide. "I needed to. I had to talk to you." She nodded slowly, her hands tightly gripping the edge of the table, as if trying to anchor herself amid the swirling chaos of emotions. The cafe buzzed around us, but in that instant, it felt utterly still, the world outside lost to the gravity of our moment. Every sound faded, leaving only the echo of our shared silence, the heaviness of the unsaid words that clung to the air between us. "I heard about the divorce papers," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, heavy with acknowledgement and fraught with guilt. "You had every right to escape." I felt an invisible weight pressing on my chest, and my thoughts surged with a mixture of anger and hurt, the venom from her betrayal still fresh, raw, and aching. "But you didn't think about what your actions could cost us." I shot back, temper flaring before my own self-doubt tempered that flame. "Those messages, Brooke, they shattered everything I thought we had." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, as if the weight of my words had cracked open a dam within her. "I know," she whispered, her voice thick. "And I'm so sorry. I was lonely, Ryan. I thought I could handle it on my own, build some friendships outside of our marriage. But I never meant to hurt you." The confession hung in the air like smoke, creeping closer and tightening around us, stinging and suffocating all at once. A part of me wanted to believe her, clinging to the flickers of hope deep down, while another part roared against the pain of her betrayal. "But you didn't talk to me," I said, the simmering frustration bleeding into my words. "You chose to seek solace elsewhere. You broke our vows, Brooke." "I didn't think it would go that far," she pleaded, her hands tightening into helpless fists. "I was lost, Ryan. You were so distant, and I thought I had to prove something. That I could be independent after everything between us." Her voice trembled, and I could see the shame etched across her face. For the first time, I detected a hint of her vulnerability, raw and exposed. The urgency of my pain began to drain, pushed back by the tide of her honesty. But is this what you wanted? For us to be like this? I countered, gesturing between us as the emotions swirled chaotically. My heart ached, torn between the desire to embrace her and the need to distance myself from the wreckage. Did you ever believe we could weather this storm together? Brooke's eyes glistened, framing the sorrow etched into her soul. I wanted to Raya. I did, but I was afraid. I allowed my fears to dictate my choices instead of coming to you. I took a breath, feeling the weight of our history pressing in, imagining the life we had built tumbling down like a house of cards. Memories flared like fireflies in the twilight. Our laughter, love, and dreams. Now they were beautiful fragments twisted into the heartache of betrayal. Could we find a way out of this labyrinth together? I don't know if we can go back to what we were, I finally said, my heart aching at the admission. But I'm here now, willing to hear you out. I want to understand. I need to know if we still have a chance. There was a fleeting moment of stillness where the world around us glimmered with possibility. Brooke's gaze focused intently on mine as if searching for reassurance. Will we be able to piece together the shards of our broken love? Faces in the cafe blurred into a distant hum as the tension crackled, each heartbeat drumming louder in the charged silence. Brooke's breath hitched, and she nodded slowly, a flicker of hope igniting in the depths of her sorrowful expression. Then let's try, Ryan, she breathed, her voice quivering between fear and determination. For once, let's be open, truly open, about what we want and need from one another. In that fragile moment, the air thickened with the weight of unending possibilities, the remnants of our love humming just beneath the surface, begging for a chance to rise anew. I felt the walls of my heart crack, just a little bit, as I allowed the light of understanding to seep through, nourishing the hope I thought had been extinguished forever. With each word shared and emotion laid bare, the road ahead unfurled with uncertainty, but perhaps it was a road worth traveling together, no matter the destination. As I shifted in my seat, the familiar aroma of roasted coffee and baked pastries filled the air, carrying with it a mix of nostalgia and heartache. I allowed myself to sit in the discomfort of the moment, absorbing the weight of Brooke's presence. She was here, vulnerable yet resolute, and I was once again faced with a woman whose heart had intertwined with mine in ways that were both glorious and excruciating. I want to understand why you felt alone, I began, choosing my words carefully. The leap from anger to curiosity was precarious, but I was willing to explore this delicate terrain, inching closer to the truth that had eluded us both. As I spoke, I noticed the way she bit her lip, a subtle indication of the emotional storm brewing within her. That loneliness crept in slowly. I thought it was just a phase, she confessed, looking down at the table, tracing the wood grain as if finding solace in its patterns. You were busy with work, and I worried that becoming too needy would push you away. Instead, I ended up shoving you away without realizing it. Her honesty left me breathless. I recalled nights spent alone in our home, watching the clock tick closer to the midnight hour, waiting for her to return from her late meetings, or worse, times when she brushed off my concerns like they were mere irritants. I had long believed that I was the one isolated in our marriage, but her words reflected a different reality, a shared responsibility that we had both ignored. I kept thinking, she continued, her voice softening. If I could fill that void myself, then it wouldn't feel so terrifying to rely on someone else. But when Jake came into the picture, I let him fill that gap. I thought it was harmless at first. I was wrong, so very wrong. The confession stung, but I understood how easy it was to mistake vulnerability for weakness, to twist it into an act of self-preservation that spiraled out of control. Hadn't I done the same? Wasn't my impulsive decision to leave also a reaction to that fear, a misguided attempt to franchise my pain into solitude? Brooke, the truth is I was scared too. I just didn't know how to express that fear without sounding like I was laying blame. All this time, I thought the fault was mine alone. I admitted, my chest tightening as I met her gaze. I didn't realize I was fostering a rift between us instead of reaching out, wanting to be there for you. Her eyes widened slightly, the realization dawning on her face. So you felt it too? The distance? I nodded slowly. It was an admission that felt as liberating as it was terrifying. I kept building walls, thinking it would shield me from the hurt. Yet it isolated me, and in turn, isolated you. I wanted to protect myself so badly that I couldn't see how it hurt us both. I replied, anger and guilt swirling within me. Somehow, sharing my vulnerabilities felt as important as hearing hers. Tears glimmered in her eyes as she absorbed my words. I see it now. We both let fear drive our decisions, letting an invisible barrier grow between us. But Ryan, I still chose to cross the line, she implored, her voice wavering, forthright yet steeped in sorrow. No matter how lost I felt, I had the power to choose honesty, to choose you over my insecurities. I could sense the turbulent tide swelling within her, and part of me understood that this recognition was a painful yet necessary step on this journey of healing. She was unraveling before me, layer by layer, her walls crumbling and revealing the deep-seated shame and confusion that had dictated her actions. Maybe we need to stop blaming each other for a second, I said, surprising myself with the clarity of my thoughts. And instead, start figuring out how to navigate this mess together. We can either drown in our pain or hold our breaths and dive deeper, uncovering what we need to survive. For a moment, there was silence between us, a cocoon of understanding woven from our shared vulnerabilities. The hum of the cafe faded to a whisper, the clinking of cups blurred into the background, leaving us in our own little world, a sanctuary created from honesty and raw exposure. Brooke nodded slowly, a flicker of hope illuminating her expression, intertwining with the sadness that still lingered. You're right. I don't want to run away anymore. I want to face this. Her voice trembled as she spoke the words aloud, an acknowledgement that seemed to resonate deep within her core. Can we start with small steps? Can we begin by communicating better, being honest about what we feel, no matter how uncomfortable it is? As I listened, I felt my heart swell with a sense of optimism, despite the remnants of pain still tangled within. Yes, small steps. We can start there, I replied, my own uncertainty easing ever so slightly in the presence of her willingness to confront the past rather than hide from it. For the first time in so long, there was a flicker of belief in my heart that perhaps our love didn't need to end in devastation. Perhaps it could reshape into something more resilient, something that would withstand the weight of this storm. Redemption, after all, required facing the deepest shadows and daring to dream once more, even amidst the wreckage. With a shared glimmer of understanding binding us, we began to sketch the framework of what might be next for us, two fractured souls daring to weave their lives back together with threads spun from honesty and an unwavering commitment toward growth, trusting that the path ahead would lead us toward a future worth fighting for. In that frenetic cafe filled with the warmth of shared moments, I grasped her hand, feeling the spark of connection pulse through us as the world roared around us. With each soft squeeze, I breathed in the promise of hope, igniting a quiet resolve blossoming between us, an invisible pact to rediscover our love, one brave conversation at a time. The journey we were embarking on was fraught with uncertainty, but for the first time, I recognized that there was something beautiful in the act of healing, an invitation to evolve as individuals and as partners intertwined by the beautiful mess of humanity.